ever think about the possibility of facing a firing squad?
I think I stand about as much chance of dying in front of a firing squad or in a gas chamber as you do being killed on a plane flight. Oh, let's hope you don't.
But you don't lie awake at night thinking about it?
Not a moment. Honest to God, not a moment. Because it's not going to happen.
After 9 years on Florida's death row and a series of unsuccessful appeals, Ted Bundy faced execution in January 1989.
The rendezvous with the electric chair will be on next Tuesday at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Bundy decided he would try one last ploy. He knew there were investigators still trying to find bodies he had buried, and families who still wanted to know whether he was the one. Connie Wilcox, whose daughter Nancy disappeared from her suburban Utah neighborhood in 1974, thought about writing a letter.
I would address it to Mr. Ted Bundy, and I would write it in a very professional way, and I would ask him if he killed my daughter. I don't want to think that Ted Bundy got her, but I don't know. I just don't know what could have happened to her.
The parents of these girls, I really feel for them because apparently they suffered an incredible tragedy in their lives. The loss of a loved one is probably the most extreme kind of loss you can suffer in this life. And I feel as much for them as anybody can.
Bundy tried to bargain. He'd give information, but he wanted a state prosecutor's office to ask for a stay of the execution so he had time to tell his stories. The offer was controversial.
I had one set of parents calling me, urging me to urge the governor of Florida to have him executed immediately. I had another set of parents calling, saying, please, we have to know what happened to our daughter.
Now all of a sudden, he wants to tell the truth. We are not considering that request. For him to be negotiating for his life over the bodies of victims is despicable.
Nonetheless, police from several states gathered in Florida to meet with Bundy, including Bob Keppel, the first detective assigned to the case.
He had never admitted in the first person that he'd ever murdered anybody to anyone. He did it with Georgianne Hawkins. He chose that one because it was a chance, he thought, for us to be able to find some bones and confirm that she was a possible victim.
Bundy said he had killed Hawkins in Issaquah, Washington. It turned out she was one of the first victims found in 1974, but her bones had never been identified.
He described the Issaquah crime scene to me, and it was almost like he was just there. I mean, he didn't miss a bend in the road. Right then, the minute he described that site, I knew that that was it. He was the one.
Bundy told many of his stories in the third person.
Not thinking clearly, but still intending not to harm her. He placed his hands around her throat, just to throttle her into unconsciousness so that she wouldn't scream anymore. She stopped struggling and stopped screaming.
On his last night, Ted Bundy confessed to dozens of murders, including that of Nancy Wilcox, whose mother had waited for word.
This was like a new death for me.
He also admitted to some killings that no one had ever connected to him.
He added two from Idaho that I didn't even know about.
Bundy had said that he had killed 30 women in various states. They were not able to find all those bodies, so they don't know that that's true. Some people say he killed a lot more than 30, but we really don't know how many he committed, though he was able to close a few cases that they had not been able to close before.
The confessions did not delay Bundy's execution, which went forward on January 24th, 1989. Hundreds of people gathered to bear witness.
I'm saying that he ought to die. I have a daughter that lives in Lake City, and I want him gone.
Theodore Bundy was executed at 7:16 this morning in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was executed for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach of Lake City, Florida.
Almost 20 years after his execution, and more than 30 years after he began his killing spree, Ted Bundy still fascinates.
He's probably the most renowned serial killer in the world, aside from Jack the Ripper, because he was so photogenic, handsome, smart, willing to talk, articulate, defended himself, that he's very much the poster boy for how the charming serial killer fooled so many people.
His crimes are studied by investigators and by would-be protégés.
Because of all the media generated by him, a number of people who aspire to become serial killers often want that kind of glamour, too.
He's definitely a premier serial killer. He is probably the model, but I don't think there's very many of them like him, fortunately.
Ted Bundy's crimes will continue to haunt those who hunted him and those whose loved ones he hunted.